Hello, welcome to Consciously Unbiased LinkedIn Live. I'm co-founder Ashish Kaushal. Today we're really excited because we're going to talk about privilege. We have a special guest, Janice Gassam, Ph.D. She's an author of Dirty Diversity, which I'm really excited to hear about that, and also how you came up with the name. Drew Train, co-founder of and president of OBERLAND. Davianne Harris, partner and head of strategy at OBERLAND, and Derek Walker, owner of Brown and Brown Advertising. So I'm going to start off with what my privilege is, and then we'll go into what you guys say yours is. So mine, I'd say one privilege I probably have just being Indian is people assume that I'm smart. It may be true, it may not be, but that's a privilege I guess I have. And so part of what we're going to talk about today is everyone's privileges, and also the sums of those privileges. Do they add up equally, right? Or is there an advantage to, let's say, white privilege or brown privilege? So we're going to go through that. So welcome everyone. Janice, do you want to start off by telling us who you are, what you do, and then how you define privilege?
Sure. So my name is Janice Gassam Astare. I am a DEI consultant, strategist. I help organizations figure out how to be more inclusive, essentially. And what I do mainly is workshops and trainings for organizations. And lately it's been like racial equity workshops, off the hook. A lot of companies are requesting those. I'm also a professor. I teach courses in business. And I am a newly minted author. I just published a book on Juneteenth called Dirty Diversity. And I guess that's a little bit about me. I'm also a senior contributing writer for Forbes. So I guess that's a little bit about me. And the way that I define privilege is when I'm thinking about privilege, I ask myself, who doesn't have the same access and opportunities that I have? And that helps me to sort of conceptualize different privileges that I have. One privilege that I have that I recognize is that even though I'm a Black woman, I am a lighter skinned Black woman, and that comes with a lot of privileges. Colorism is something that is a big issue in the Black community and in communities of color. So I recognize that my lighter skin privilege probably makes me more palatable to white audiences. And how do I use my privileges to impact change? So I guess that's a little bit about me and how I define privilege.
Okay, great, thank you. Drew, you want to go next?
Sure. So my name is Drew Train. I'm a father of three. I'm married. I'm the owner and co-founder of OBERLAND, which is a purpose-driven ad agency. I also sit on the board of the National Alliance for Mental Illness here in New York City, and which provide the largest provider of free mental health service and support here in Manhattan and in the 5 boroughs. And I'm also on the board of directors for Summer Infant, which is a publicly traded manufacturer of baby products, swaddles and strollers and that sort of thing. And I guess, I define, how do you define privilege? The ability to assume that whatever it is you're thinking is the default or the safe or the normal way of going. Like the ability to just take for granted that you're in the right place, or that you're going to say something, even if it's stupid, it's not really going to matter. And that it's a comfort that once I think is popped is very, very hard to probably rebuild. It's like once somebody experiences a trauma, it's very hard for that person to feel comfortable in a lot of places again. And I think privilege is the ability to just by default be comfortable in a situation. Like even for me, my privilege is like I'm a big, fat, bald white guy. So like it's easy for me to be comfortable places. Everyone always assumes I have enough money to buy what I want. Like wherever I am, I'm supposed to be there. And so nobody bugs me. And and even like when I was living in China, I lived in China for a year in 2008. My wife is 6 feet tall, also long, beautiful hair. And like when we walked into a place, we were often the only white people there, but that still somehow felt privileged. Even though, people were looking at us, it's because they were wishing they could trade places, I think, in ways, and not to be ego-driven, but that to me is a privilege. I think that's nice about being kind of the middle-aged white guy.
Thank you. Davianne, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, Davianne Harris. I'm partner and head of strategy at OBERLAND, so work closely with Drew. So in terms of privilege, right, I agree with everything that's been said in terms of definition, but in thinking about why it's such a hard thing to talk about, as we talk about white privilege in particular, I think a lot of people, interchange it with racism, right? And this idea that if you are a beneficiary of white privilege, you are a racist. And I don't believe that's true. I believe that, yes, there are people that are racist that benefit from white privilege, but the idea is that it stems from systemic racism, right? And when it's unchecked, then that's where you lead, it leads to biases and racist individual behaviors. But in and of itself, right, privilege is what everyone's talking about in terms of those comforts, in terms of, the just living in what's, a normal world where you go into a store and, the products and foods and what have you are tailored for you and not having to think anything differently about it. And, I think for me, I can relate to Janice in the sense of being a lighter skinned Black woman, and that being its own privilege as well as, education. And even I would say just in a position where I can have these conversations candidly, right, about race and not fear that Drew is going to not let me work at the agency anymore.
You don't know that. No.
Going out in different forums and wrote something for Ad Age a couple weeks ago after everything happened after the murder of George Floyd and others, right? And so being able to have those open dialogues and challenge others, not just, in my comfort zone, in my Instagram community, but also, businesses, leaders, right? And people that need to hear about these issues and really think about them, and using that platform and kind of the position I'm in to push those conversations and narratives forward. Because I do think this is important things that we all need to talk about and really just be upfront about.
Great points. Derek, and your thoughts?
Okay, what was the question? No, let me quit. Hi, I'm Derek Walker, owner of Brown & Browner Advertising in the city of Columbia, South Carolina. When we talk about privilege, I'm a writer. I'm a copywriter, so I instantly go to the definition. I'm sorry. And it's a special right, advantage, or immunity granted to or available only to a preferred group or individual. I think it's sort of like we talked about earlier, we mentioned defunded. I think the word privilege has 2 or 3 meanings. And for a lot of poor people, they see that when you talk about white privilege, you're talking about rich to them, not access, not the availability, but they're thinking privilege is rich. So they get offended. No, I had to work to get here. Privilege doesn't mean you don't have to work. Privilege means you may work less than someone else, or it's an easier road. It may still be a struggle, but it may not be the same struggle that everybody else has. Yeah. Now, my privilege is I'm an old Black guy. I'm closer to meeting my God, so I can say the things I want to say, and I have an immunity into feeling whether or not I don't care if you care. There's nothing you can do to me now. And it's nice to be there. And I now understand why Chris Rock said the most racist people are old Black guys. Because I think he used the wrong word with race, but most just privilege. See, I can speak my mind. What are you gonna do? I'm 1 foot in the grave here, folks. I'm like, hey, okay, life expectancy for a Black guy is 60-something years old. I don't have that much longer, so I'm gonna say what I gotta say, and it may not be granted to me, but it's what you claim, And I think that's also what we have to look at. There's a privilege that we sometimes claim, and that's the freedom that we can do certain things.
Absolutely, well said. Drew, I have a question for you. So given that you have white privilege, like number one, how do you, like, I know people shut off when they hear that term, right? So how do you prevent yourself from shutting off? And then what do you feel your responsibility is because you have it? And why are you passionate about diversity? Because I know you guys have reached out to me about all the great initiatives you guys do to sort of remind yourself that you have power to make change happen and make it lasting.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the world is a very hard place no matter who you are. And everybody in their own life has had trauma. You know, for me, my parents got divorced, and that was like a big thing for me to get over and deal with. And like, so yes, I've had white privilege in a number of ways. There are times where it's gotten me off the hook, got me out of trouble. There are times when, you know, I've been able to take advantage of it. And there are times when it's just bestowed some good luck on me. But there are lots of other times where the universe has bestowed a pile of crap on me. So the fact that my privilege has helped me get to where I am, it has. I don't feel like that takes away where I am. I don't feel like that takes away my accomplishments. I still feel proud of myself. And like, but yeah, I had all kinds of good breaks. And that's why I feel like I should try to help other people. Right. And like do unto others, or, you know, put into the universe what you want to get out of the universe. And like, you know, I've seen other people as I've come up through my career get passed on, passed over, not understood, not given the benefit of the doubt, bad assumptions made about them. And like, you know, I'm in a place now where I don't have a boss. So I have some of the freedom Derek's talking about. I have longer to go, so I am more afraid of using it probably than him. But there's some freedom in it. I don't have to get it checked. If I can say the industry's racist, you know, it's sexist with problems, and I don't have to worry about, oh, now I'm the squeaky wheel, or, you know, I don't have any of the dynamics of a holding company anymore. So like, I can speak my mind. I should. I feel like with power comes responsibility. Right. And privilege and power are very, very connected. And as the owner of a business, I get both. And they're both growing. That's the other thing. Like, as a white person, like, there's privilege within the white world too. Right. So like, neither of my parents graduated college. We didn't have a ton of money. And like, we grew into it. And so like, when I first got to the University of Richmond, I was exposed to the privilege that I'd never seen rich kids before. It was like, and I grew up in an all white town. So I didn't know I had privilege because I didn't have any comparison points. But I get to college, my world opens. I start to see I do have it, but not nearly as much as those guys, because I was still the Jewish kid at the, you know, Catholic school. And, you know, it plays itself out. But now I have the chance to open doors for people. And like, that's the responsibility that comes with power and potential.
So you don't view power as a zero-sum game, essentially. So it's for you to share.
We had a great training session about this. A guy named Ken Dolan Del Vecchio, when we started our Nothing Changes If We Don't, came in. The first thing he talked about was power, privilege, and me was the name of the session. And it was about power over versus power with. Power is not a limited, finite resource that is traded between people. It's something that can be generated. It's not energy. It's not electricity. It's something that you can grow and generate. And so if you think about creating power with other people, and for other people, instead of creating power over other people, at the end of the day, the people in that circle have more power if it's with than if it's you having power over them, right? The total power supply in the company, in my case, is greater if there's power with people. So we want to have more partners than just me and Bill, right? We named 2, and we have 3 more spots open for other people. And like, it's better for the company if there's more of us with more into it and more empowered than it is if it's just me and Bill barking orders at people.
Yeah, absolutely. Janice, tell me about Dirty Diversity. How did you come up with the name, and tell me about the concept around it?
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. Well, in my work, I find that, and I'm sure all of you have found the same thing to be true, is that when I come in and I do these diversity, and I don't even call them trainings, I call them workshops. When I come in and I do these workshops, just the word diversity has become like a dirty word. It has negative connotations, and people have an idea in their mind about what a diversity workshop or training should entail. And I mean, there's a lot of research that indicates that diversity trainings and programs are ineffective And so I understand where some of that sort of resistance, I call it like diversity fatigue. People are in America are tired of talking about diversity. It's kind of like this buzzword. So the reason I titled it Dirty Diversity was to kind of play on that idea, but really in the book, I talk about my experiences and things that have actually worked and been effective to increase inclusion and equity in the workplace. So I talk about things like employee book clubs and how to address microaggressions in the workplace and developing that open line of communication with employees. So diversity trainings in itself will not produce like systemic changes. And I actually saw a meme that said, the revolution will not be in diversity and inclusion trainings. And I disagree with that somewhat because I do these workshops and trainings, but I think that it's one of the tools in your toolkit, but it can't be the only thing. So the focus of the book is really on, aside from workshops and trainings, additional ways to create inclusion and equity in your workplace. So having discussions like we're having on privilege, because I had an experience where I was doing a workshop for a company and they specifically told me, we don't want you to talk about white privilege because talking about something like white privilege will make the audience less receptive to the message and the things that you're saying. And it's just interesting because I don't think that not talking about something makes the problem go away. I think that being comfortable is not going to produce changes. We have to put people in an uncomfortable position to talk about privilege and to talk about these things in order for change to actually take place.
Can I jump in? I thought something you said was brilliant. So the diversity versus equity language, right? So to a white guy who's not that great in the middle of the pack at an ad agency or a big company, when they hear diversity, this person's feeling like they've been passed over 9 times, right? They're not getting ahead already. When they hear the word diversity, they hear, oh, someone's getting in line in front of me. Mm-hmm. When they hear equity, oh, we're all fighting together to get better. The big difference in positioning and to lean, the diversity got dirtied, I think, because white people who hadn't made it are like, oh, great, now someone else is getting, and like, that's a privilege in and of itself to be like, oh, they should get in line behind me. That's inherently biased and privileged. But I think that's you have among the staff level at a big company, they're like, they haven't made it yet, so it's still ruthless competition.
Yeah, Drew, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what diversity really means. I think people think it's affirmative action and giving unfair advantages to underrepresented groups who aren't qualified. And that's not the ultimate goal. Not that that doesn't happen, but that's not like the ultimate goal.
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. I've got to say this real quick. It doesn't make a difference what you call it. Absolutely none. When we called it affirmative action, white guys complained. Right. When we shifted to diversity, white guys complained. Right. When you move to equity, white guys they're gonna complain again. Because there's nowhere, and this is part of the white privilege, is there's nowhere that they want to recognize that they may not have earned the spot that they got. Right. So no matter what you call it, they're going to complain that they're being left behind or passed over. When
the game's changed, because in the past we were first by default. Now we have to start even.
And how dare you ask that we start even? I mean, that's all we're asking for, and that certain people still hang or cling to this idea that the word diversity isn't divisive. No word is divisive. It's what you do with that word. It's how you interpret that word. I'm going to stick with diversity. And I love that you call it dirty, but I'm sticking with it because every time we change, we set ourselves back a couple of steps. We have to redefine things. We have to reset. We have to restart. And that's how you prolong this. The first diversity and inclusion effort in advertising was 1968. We have solved wars in shorter periods of time. then we have solved hiring, promotion, and retention of talent of color, Black folks in advertising. It has taken us 50 years to get to the point where we're talking about it again. Now, forgive my rage, but it's a ploy by a group of mediocre white guys in the middle of the pack. And I'm sorry, but I come from a competitive environment. The same argument with Major League Baseball when it was integrated. I think advertising should be like street basketball. You show up, and the court determines whether you can play or you don't. And there's a whole bunch of folks figuring out now that, damn, if I have to compete that way, I might not be good enough.
Right.
You know,
expand the pool.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. We have to hold to these terms, because when we don't, we have to start over redefining the new term. And equity won't work, because sooner or later you got to figure out, to make things equitable, you either have to pull somebody forward or you have to pull someone back. And that will piss off my white counterparts wholly in advertising, because wait a minute, I got here on my own. No, you didn't. In a fair fight, I can take you, or I can't. But let's have that fair fight.
Yeah.
Let's see, earn this. And that's have to keep on moving. The word isn't what's important. It's our thoughts and our actions. We talk about diversity and inclusion, and the Me Too movement was supposed to boost women, but Black women and brown women knew that the word women didn't apply to them. And our agencies bared that out because they hired white women. They promoted white women. And we're still waiting for our brown and Black sisters to be promoted and hired as CEOs and presidents and COOs and chief creative officers, chief financial officers. And Lord, don't even get started on Black men. There are more Black women in advertising than there are Black men. So I'm sorry. We talk and play with this, but privilege has done so much damage because I'm excluded just by the color of my skin. The opportunities have to be there. We have to pull that. We have to look at what privilege does. And I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent. I quit.
You're right, though. We started Nothing Changes If We Don't, which is our DEI initiative two summers ago. And the triggering moment was we were at Small Agency of the Year Awards, and the night before the award show, there was like a little cocktail party in the hotel, and it was lovely. And it was Terry and Sandy, who were two fabulous women. They're the reigning champions, and 40 other middle-aged white dudes in blue blazers. And that's when Bill and I were like, all right, if we win this thing, we're going to have a year in the sun where people are paying attention to us. Let's do an initiative about racism in the industry. And we had Nothing Changes If We Don't. But it was because that party was, I don't know how it manifested that way, but it was really, really noticeable. And we're both like, holy crap. I mean, the only women there were the reporters and staff. It was strange in 2018. This is July of 2018. So you're right about that.
I have had, and this is part of it. I had, and I don't have the review anymore, but I don't work for anybody anymore. I had a review in 2009 from a group creative director. And on my evaluation, he said, I should be working for Derek. And therein lies the problem. I've got to, and I'm not talking about me, but I have to, because I know my case. I can go toe to toe with any CEO, but I have to run my own shop because there's no place for me in advertising. I see us grind through young people, keep hiring them as juniors and entry level with no process and no pathway to success. And I got to worry about a middle-aged white guy who's been mediocre at best, but been allowed in the system because of privilege to exist, when there's a brilliant young Black female or male behind him who has no possibility of ever getting to where he is.
Right.
So speaking of, that's a good point. So Davianne, you've kind of grown up in the advertising space, right? As a Black woman. How do you think we can enlist more people to create opportunities and privilege for good? Like, what are some ideas around that?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I would say beyond, you know, just the importance of the people within the industry, it's right what we're all seeing in terms of the advertising that gets created and made. It's what the world sees. It's how little, you know, Black and brown children see themselves or don't see themselves reflected, right? So I do believe it's so important, and the, you know, work can only be as inclusive and representative as the people making it and behind it. So I think that's one thing that, you know, as we think about the importance of diversity and inclusion in the ad space. But, you know, to everything that Janice was saying and her work, it absolutely is so important. I think that people are finally coming around in the past, I mean, even weeks, right, to, you know, what it really will take. And, you know, I think one of the things is personal reflection and soul searching before any even processes and organizational changes get made, because you have so many leaders, right, that, you know, are willing to you know, hire someone or write off the responsibility of diversity and inclusion in an organization so that they don't have to deal with it or touch it. And they have their own you know, privileges that they have not checked or really, you know, grappled with. And so, you know, and really, obviously, before the past few weeks, we weren't even seeing those things talked about in terms of, you know, it's too political, right, to talk about race and, you know, it's not existent. Oh, you're, you know, overreacting, all of those things that we could write things off of, right? So I think it's, you know, these individual attitudes that despite, you know, and I'm talking about the people who want to do the right thing, right? Yeah. Not that are just blatantly racist and don't want the change and are, you know, just trying to hire someone to check a box, but they want to do the right thing, but see those, you know, programs and see affirmative action, see, you know, all these different efforts to bring more people of color into the industry as, you know, a handout or a way to help the community, right? Because, you know, that I think is the difference between seeing, you know, privilege as you're already a step ahead or many steps ahead, and all of these efforts are to just, you know, an attempt to bring people just a little bit closer to the starting line of where you began, as opposed to propelling them ahead of you. So I think, you know, and that takes, right, that really honest, hard conversation and, you know, internalization of racism, systemic racism that has happened before you even go about trying to build out and really address the actual problems within your organization. Because until people really grapple with that and think about that and understand that, it's you know, it's not going to go anywhere, and you're going to see chief diversity officers and D&I and affinity groups to the nines, but they're all in their little bubbles and not actually inciting real change. And, you know, you end up with the quotas and the, you know, the pipeline issue that we keep talking about where, you know, you know, we don't have any qualified Black candidates. What can I do? Should I just hire a Black person? Well, are you looking in an all-white pool, or are you looking in a diverse enough pool where you're going to be able to hire diverse talent? So all those things are obviously, I mean, there's a lot that needs to happen. And, you know, we talk about systemic racism, and we're seeing how just deep it is in terms of every, not just corporate America, but healthcare, education, you name it, right? But, you know, in order to chip away, the work has to really start within people and being honest and doing the hard work, asking the hard questions, being open to answering hard questions, and being accountable.
And I think we have to also take the stigma off of having biases and prejudice.
Yep.
Everybody's going to have those. Now,
Derek, you make a good point. We one of the things we do at Consciously Unbiased, we talk about three things, right? One is not all biases are bad. So biases are probably based on life experiences, how you grew up, your family values. Part of it's about survival, right? Your experiences. And so a lot of the training right now is based on guilt. And guilt is one strategy, but it doesn't always work for everybody, right? And so if I know that I have biases and I own them and I'm proud of them, if you teach me a new one and just say you're applying it the wrong way, and now I'm in control of how to do it, right? Instead of saying I didn't know what I know and I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, right? And then the second thing is we talk about the struggle between curiosity and fear of the unknown. So if I've never met somebody who's different than me, right? Like I never met a gay person in high school. So I make these assumptions, but then when I actually start taking the effort to get to know somebody, I realize they're not really that much different than me, right? And that opens up opportunities. And so I kind of throw this to Janice, like how do you make sure that companies, like everyone says do the work, right? But on some level, when you throw out a word like systemic racism, people shut off, right? So we have to kind of give them a playbook and say, these are the steps you have to take to overcome this. And it's not gonna happen overnight, right? Because like you said with the Me Too movement, we had white women equal pay, but not black women equal pay, or not Indian equal pay, right? And so we segmented that and we've made everything a favor or a focus, right? So how do we make sure that we give them the playbook that actually helps them overcome these different challenges without just shutting off or hearing white privilege or systemic racism?
I think when we have the conversation, I can't go into a discussion about privilege without talking about something called white adjacency. So you can be a person of color and still benefit from white privilege. You can still be an underrepresented group. So I think when people, in my experiences, when we talk about privilege, people automatically think, well, I'm not white, so I don't have any bias. I can't perpetuate anti-Blackness. But it's important to also have this conversation within communities of color and how we perpetuate this anti-Black sentiment. So when I have these workshops with employees, I go through this idea of white adjacency, where people recognize that they might be white passing. You might look at a person. I had a student, for example, who identifies as Puerto Rican, but she says, she's white. You look at her, she looks white. So she recognized she had privilege, and she said, I don't tell anyone I'm Puerto Rican unless they specifically ask, because I recognize that being perceived as white comes with privileges. So you could be, and it's important to understand that your closeness to looking white allows you and affords you certain privileges. So I also think it's important to highlight that each of us have different types of privileges. And when we talk about privilege, it doesn't always just apply to white privilege. Again, as Davianne mentioned, as lighter skinned Black women, we have privileges. So we have to understand and recognize that. So I always try to just point that out. And again, asking the question of like, who doesn't have access and opportunities that I have? So things like, I recognize in the United States, I have weight privilege because we put on a pedestal women who are slimmer and have slimmer bodies, and we shame women who don't, kind of fit that certain mold. I don't have any children yet, so I have time flexibility privilege. And just seeing what my friends are going through now who have kids and homeschooling their kids. So there's many ways that, and I actually sat down and wrote down 10 or 15 different privileges that I have, but I recognize, and I think nothing's wrong with having privilege. It's not doing anything about it. So that's really important, is I can't be an effective ally if I don't even recognize the privileges I have and use those privileges to impact changes. So speaking up for people who may not be valued or seen as an expert in your workplace, in a meeting, maybe amplifying someone else's voice. So I had one of my colleagues, I work at a university, and one of my colleagues actually sent out an email, white male, sent out an email to everyone in the department basically saying, Janice put out this book. And I thought that's very nice of him to send out that email. I'm new. I just started at this university a few years ago, but that's a small example of just amplifying my voice, and maybe people will value that because it came from a different person saying it. So, recognizing our individual privileges, even if you're a marginalized group, is really, really important.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, I totally agree. And I also think there is this perception, that people of color, Black people, for some of the privileges that have to do with status or jobs or the things that you can't see, that is a privilege, right? And so, when we talked about this a little bit earlier before we started, I call those comforts, right? But when I'm walking into a high-end store, nobody knows what I do or, where I came from, right? They see a Black woman who could steal something. Or, the last week or the other night, my husband and I were talking about, I'm sure all of you, or maybe some of you have been hearing the fireworks that are going on in the tri-state area. And he said, oh, I'm gonna go take a look and see, what's going on. I was like, no, you're not. Like, not because we live in a safe neighborhood, but because we live in a safe neighborhood and you as a Black man could be perceived as a threat, right? And, it's funny because I think a few weeks ago, if I told that story to someone who's white, they would say, oh, you're just overreacting, right? But now everyone's kind of seeing that, no, you can say, oh, he has this degree, he's a successful businessman. Nobody sees that. They see a Black man that's a threat, right? Yeah. So I think when we talk about privilege as well, it's being able to walk out, but it's also not having to think about that, not having to
confidence.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Confidence is such an advantage in life, in presenting, and just in anything. Self-confidence is a deciding factor very often, and it's way more easy to be confident when you're white and privileged.
Exactly. Or even that you're not questioned when you're getting a job or you got it.
Like I was.
They don't think white, you got the job.
Right. Or when you're young, like if you're younger and successful, right? I was 34, I was elected onto a corporate board. But I wasn't that weird because I was still a white kid who went to a good school. So like, the whiteness compensated for the youth in that situation. And, and I had great colleagues, so that was fine. But the confidence is hard to replace, especially when it's confidence all the time. It's not just confidence in the meeting when you're giving the pitch. It's confidence when you're walking down the street. It's confidence when you walk into a bar and you're trying to meet somebody, it's just confidence. And it's a big advantage in life.
100%. Derek, so we see you consciously and biased. We talk about connecting the mind and the heart to overcome inequality and racism. I think you're passionate about this through storytelling. Can you give an example where you've seen that work?
Can't use his name. Okay. I'm on the 405 in LA with an art director. We're going to a shoot. And we worked together for 2 years, I think. He said, can I tell you something, D? Because he calls me D. He says, I want to thank you. And I was like, thank me for what? He says, if it wasn't for you, I'd still be a racist. I'm driving down the road. I'm going, okay, I have seriously missed something here. But he grew up in a household in a community where there were no Black people. His images were shaped by parents who were not nice people. So here he was stuck working with a Black guy as a partner, and he had expectations and stereotypes that had been ingrained for 20-something years. And it took 3 years of us just working and playing together for him to realize that what they thought was wrong. And I think those small victories, there's nothing I did but be me. And there's nothing he did but be himself. But he was open to change. And there were some bumps in the beginning. There are always bumps in the beginning when you pair two people up as partners in any endeavor. But it was that we were willing to, we stuck it out and we hung out and we figured out. And it wasn't like we sat down and talked about race, but it was like when we were assigned to go to we had a high-end jewelry client, and we had a really high-end jewelry client. I mean, $1 million for a set of earrings. Yeah. And when I walked in and security bristled up, he'd get upset. He's like, whoa, You didn't get upset when I walked in. Why are you getting upset when my partner walks in? You know, and I'm sitting there going, please stop before you get me tased. But that guy, the security guy, is still looking at me while you're yelling at them. And I'm like, okay, this is bad. But it took experience and involvement and getting to know each other. And I think that's what's missing from all of this is it works best. You can't teach this. You have to experience it. And you have to go through the bumps and the bruises, the ups and the downs. I mean, we're partners. We argued and fussed and cursed each other out, but that's what all creative teams do. So it wasn't like we did it because we're black and white. We did it because we're creators, art director and copywriters. It's like putting a cat and a dog together. You know, the stereotype of cats and dogs. I know they exist together now. But he had to get to where he needed to get on his own too. You know? No. And I think I'm saying this because I think it has to happen. I think white people have to get together without us in the room and talk about race. If the only time you talk about race is when there's a black or a brown person in the room, that's a weight and a burden on us to help you solve a problem that you need to talk about. You need to be comfortable talking about your biases and prejudice because they play out in hiring. They play out in how people are evaluated for promotions or even just to keep their jobs. Think about, and I've wandered off that answer, but I think I've given you the answer. But I wanted to put this part in because we don't think about this. Young lady came to me last week and she was told she needs to tone it down. You know, we never tell young white guys to not be passionate about work. We never do. To tell a young black woman that you can't speak or don't speak as much. But that's what we ask of. We ask that of. I've had young white creatives throw chairs in the meeting. I can't lean on a table too quickly without scaring a white person. I'm aggressive. I get the smile in your profile picture. Well, you know, I can run off a whole name or a slew of people who we worship in advertising who never smile and are never called grumpy or angry. Yeah. You know, to see this, you want to see it work? It works when people work together. It works. Let me give you, okay. As an agency, I'm thinking it's oddly enough, the agency we never look at as far as diversity and inclusion is concerned. Burrell works it better than anybody else because Burrell doesn't have all black employees. There are white men in senior positions at Burrell. Yeah. Now, if white agencies want to learn about diversity and inclusion, guess what? Go look at the black ones because they take in the best talent and it doesn't matter color or whatever. Look at what Coca-Cola and McDonald's have done. Both have had high-level black CEOs or CMOs or COOs. The examples are out there. You know, there's corporations where we succeeded. It just happens that we haven't succeeded in advertising agencies this way.
Yeah. But I do think, look, I think you brought up a good point in the sense of the storytelling and the permission to be honest, right? Because if I'm just coming at you, you come back to me, we don't actually give each other a chance to like get to know each other and understand, then we just don't solve anything, right? So like, for example, right now with the BLM movement, I think white people are actually taking an active interest in saying like, I've been blind for the last 400 years, but I'm right now, it's important. But if we're now going to them saying, well, why are you doing this now? Then we're not giving them the space to actually help us, right? No. And then who loses? Like we have to basically come to the table and have them come to the table and actually be open to receiving them as well, right? Because it's a two-way relationship to fix the situation and to transfer some sort of open up more power to everybody. You have to both come to the table at some level, right?
You
maybe
do
a little bit further, but we still have to give them the opportunity. I always say it's like if my wife, if I've been bad to her for 4 years and now I'm starting to be nice to her, now she's like, why are you being nice to me? Then we're not getting her, right?
But you got to understand, if you had been beating your wife for the last 4 years,
Yeah.
and then you decide to be nice, you have to earn her trust back.
100%.
And you have to, you can't just wake up today and be good and think, oh, the black folks are just going to be so happy that we're good now. No, we've heard this story. This is a reoccurring theme in our neighborhood, you know.
Yeah, there's an element to white privilege though, which is you don't ever have to earn anyone's trust. It's given to you by default. So the idea of having to earn it in the first place is not only what do you mean, earn it? How do I earn it?
Yeah.
I don't know how. I'm not in this position where it's not given to me as the benefit of the doubt. So how do I go about it? Do I start by thinking of everything I said in the past or did in the past that might have either used my privilege as a sword or done or says, like, how do I atone or go, like, how do I get your trust in the moment? Because I need it right now. And trust never happens like that.
No.
Probably.
You gotta be willing to do the work, right?
Yeah. And like you can't even hire black talent right away. This is the rub, I think, within agencies. Like I'm a white guy. Most of my ad network is white. And like we're a small agency. You know, when we hire people, the day after we sign a contract, it's like I gotta hire somebody now. So I look to the people in my network and like what we're doing, and like we've had a DEI initiative for 2 years. But what I realized is we just had a position open up, and it was like we didn't have anybody in the pipeline. So what we assigned a person on our team now to pre-recruit 10 or scout 10 people at every job title in the agency, regardless, all with Black, Indigenous, people of color. So that, because I know I can find a white account executive when I need to look for one, but I don't know if I could find a Black executive. And if I can interview 10 people and none of them are Black, it's not, I'm just lying to everybody.
Yeah.
So you got to get ahead of it, and like agencies are notoriously reactive, but like white people, you got to do some planning on this one. You got.
But let me give you this real quick. Let me give you this real quick. I was taught how to do this by a white CEO, Paul Council at Kramer Krasel, back in the days of dinosaurs. When he interviewed me, he explained to me, "You are going to be our first Black creative. It is unfair what's about to happen to you because our people have never, our team has never worked with Black creatives. This is my lunch, you know." So I'm sitting there going, oh crap. And he's like, and I need you to understand, I am here for you. So when you need to come sit in my office and vent or tell me what's wrong, I'm here for you. But I need you to understand it's not going to be that easy because I don't know the hearts of my employees. So I didn't go into the situation thinking, oh, they're going to love me and everything's going to be fine. He prepared me as best he could for the situation I was going into.
Yeah.
And then he backed it with his actions. To this day, I tell anybody, I'd go to work for Paul again. You know, but those are the steps that leaders take. You know, he was vested in my success, but he was also honest enough up front with me. So when people say, come work for us, and we're in Iowa, and I'm just using Iowa as an example, no harm to anybody, then you need to tell them, yes, there are Black people in Iowa, Sioux City, but you're still going to be one of the few Blacks at the agency. And this isn't going to be easy, but we're going to try to do this together. See, that language we never get. You know,
it's funny. And the people in Iowa, so many of them don't know they have privilege because they don't have the context of the comparison point.
Yeah.
They're in a white.
But I'm saying is, I'm just used them.
Fascinating.
Yeah. I just use them because New York is so dense, it's so diverse, but still, to earn my trust, you got to be honest with me. If you look back and go, oh crap, I snapped at so-and-so, or we treated so-and-so differently because she was a female or she was a Black female, then why not go in the office and sit down with that person and go, you know what, I was wrong. You know, in reflection, I could have handled this better.
Absolutely.
What that does is it frees that person, and it frees you. You want trust with me? Then come at me. That's why my art director I have my art director's back. He can call me. We don't work together now, but he can call me anytime and say, D, I'm thinking about changing jobs. Can you look at my portfolio? That's the first thing I do for him. Or he has a job. He goes, my copywriter seems like he's phoning it in. Read this and tell me what you think. I'll drop anything for him, because on the highway in California, he thanked me for helping him to change. He didn't have to say that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sorry.
No, I totally agree. I was going to quickly just say, but I think the key, though, is beyond the trust aspect. It's the importance of having people in leadership positions that are of color, Black, et cetera, because as much as the learning is happening and, you know, people are reading, which is amazing, and having these conversations, nothing replaces the experience, and you can't undo 400 plus years of systemic racism, right? So by reading, and I promote education and articles and programs and D&I initiatives, but it doesn't take the place of someone who's lived that experience, who can say, hey, no, we can't push that out. No, you were out of line. Or just, you know, seeing the bigger picture through a different lens. So I think that's another important piece, in addition to the trust and the honesty and openness and education on all fronts, is, you know, something we have to think about.
Mm-hmm. Janice, towards you. So you put companies through training, right? So let's say it's a 5,000 person company, and the leadership comes in and says Black Lives Matter, and this is why we're doing this, and they share stories and they say we're going to make initiatives happen, right? And then there's a segment of your population that is resisting the change, right? And then they get a lot of negative feedback, and then they say, okay, forget it, I'm giving up. Like, how do you make sure that they stay on the path that they feel is right and on the right side of history, and encourage them to keep going, even though there's going to be people who fall out, and that's okay, but they need to go?
Well, I would say a few things. So the first thing is, I always encourage companies, and I say, whether you're hiring me again or you're hiring somebody else, like, you can't start and stop with this one workshop. Nothing is going to change with just one session. So it has to be an ongoing session. But sometimes I hit walls with that because companies don't have the funding. So that's another issue. You're not allocating enough of a budget for inclusion and diversity. So you can't expect me, and I've had this happen to me before, where a very large, well-known company that I'm sure you all know, one of the top consulting firms in the world, asked me to come in, speak during Black History Month to talk about microaggressions, yet didn't have much money in their budget to pay me to come in and speak. So you want Black and brown people to come in and give their knowledge and their skills and their expertise without adequately compensating them and not having a budget for that. So I think that's part of the problem, but you should have a budget for ongoing conversations. That's really, really important. Nothing is going to change from that. So there's going to be resistance. I expect that, especially if I'm the first person coming in to facilitate this sort of discussion. But over time, change starts to happen, but it has to be a consistent conversation. And then I always go into it with the mindset of, I know I'm not going to change every single person, but I'm planting seeds in people's minds. And if that can cause them to grow and change in time, then it's okay that some people will be left back. Because what I also encourage companies to do is put structures and systems in place to mitigate the individual biases that we have. So if you have a blind resume system, even if I have a bias toward Black people, I can't see this person's name. So if there are practices and policies in place, that can help to mitigate our individual biases, because everyone is going to have them. Everyone has them. So that's important. But one thing I was going to say, along with what Derek and Davianne had said, is that it's interesting. Companies always say, oh, we can't find Black, marketers or PR people. But if you just search hashtags on LinkedIn, you could see thousands of people, tens of thousands, who are job seekers. So if you're a white person with white privilege, actively seek out and use your network to help those job seekers find jobs. There's people in my network who say, I'm an accountant. Can you help me find a job? And I'm like, I don't have a lot of accountants in my circle, but I can reach out to this white accountant who probably has lots of connections in their circle. So you can use LinkedIn, searching hashtags to find job seekers and lending your network to these people and making introductions via LinkedIn DM is something so simple that you could do to use your privilege to impact change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can I, this is, I'm on both sides of the fence. We need senior people of color, Black folks in positions, but it's a process. I don't want you to go out and just grab somebody and they're not set up to succeed. So it's going to take some time, and we have to be patient about that part. You know, nobody's going to change their entire board. Nobody's going to change their entire leadership council or whatever, and they shouldn't have to. What we're saying is bring people in with the intent on growing them to those positions. Give them that pathway. Show that you have a plan. I'm not looking to replace anybody immediately. What I'm thinking is grow these folks like you grew the people you have. You see that longevity is the goal. But if you have a plan and you tell me you have a plan, then as a future employee, that's a lot more towards the trust and the belief issue part, you know, but you got to have a plan.
Yeah.
Don't just pull a person into it and say, well, you're going to come in and be a creative director. You're going to be an accounts supervisor. If I'm sitting there talking to you, yeah, but what does this mean? Acknowledge that we have nobody of color in our leadership, but that doesn't mean you don't have an opportunity to grow to this position. And we're going to try and work this and remove the barriers that have existed before. There's an honesty to this that we just don't get, but we tell our clients every day to be authentic and honest in our messaging. And we sit across from people and we know that our systems aren't ready yet, but we don't tell them we aren't ready yet. We're trying. You know, that's got to appear somewhere, folks.
Absolutely. Let's open up to see if anyone has any questions.
I saw a lot of comments in the.
Yeah, I kept seeing. Yeah.
Some people are saying, "Preach, brother," talking about you there.
I don't see these comments. Wait a minute. I got to switch over.
I like Jacob wrote, "Shame. No man wants to deal with their shame. Doing better, not doing better." What do you guys say to that?
That's why you kind of have to. I find that when I admit my own privileges or discuss my own privileges, it sort of makes people's defenses go down. Because if I come in and say, hey, I'm going to talk about privilege and how all of you white people have privilege and you're racist, you know, people they have their guard up. But if I start talking about the ways that I have privilege and privilege manifests in my life, then people are like, you know, I've had this discussion and they're like, wow, I never thought that you as a Black woman, like their mind is blown that it's like you have privilege. So I think that kind of going into that discussion, kind of being vulnerable and discussing your own privileges lets people, reduces that shame that Jacob is referring to.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be shame with privilege. I remember the first time I really felt white privilege. I was 18. I was a sophomore in college. Moved off campus. Huge party in downtown Richmond. Just ridiculous.
This is Richmond, Virginia, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's where I went to.
Okay.
I went to University of Richmond.
I went to VCU.
Okay, so we lived on Monument Avenue, right from the Stonewall Jackson Monument, which will hopefully come down soon. And first weekend, raging party, 2 cops show up. I step out of the apartment, underage, drunk, smelled like weed, just everything you can think of. And they're just like, end it. Let me turn off the lights, carry 3 kegs of beer, 200 people out. They don't stop anyone. They don't frisk anyone. They don't search anyone. They don't bust anyone. They don't even ask me for a driver's license. See how old we are. They let us get in the cars, drive 20 minutes across town and continue the party. There's no way on earth, if I was black, that would have happened. None of that would have gone down like that. And, in preparation for this, Davianne and I were having a party conversation. We're like, do a thought experiment, right? And so that happened. I answered the door. Nobody busted me. And I had long hair and a hemp necklace. I was a hippie when I was younger. So, like, they didn't care. If I was at a party and there was 100 black people at the party and me, and I didn't know anybody, didn't know the host, and the police answered the door, they'd send me out to talk to them. Even though I didn't live there, even though I might have been underage, would have been that would have been the choice, right? And that's how you really can tell that privilege is there, right? Even at 18.
Definitely. Erica Riggs asked, do you guys think this true change is really happening right now? Do you think we're at a tipping point, and how do we make sure this actually follows through?
It seems like it to me, because this feels a little bit different. I know that we've things like this have happened before, but I think this is a little bit different than in the 90s with Rodney King. Even though that was on film, Rodney King didn't die. So I think that this is just different. People watched a man die on film. So it seems like companies are really catalyzed to change, and they're recognizing, hey, one training or workshop is not going to cut it. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I do think that this is a tipping point.
I think the biggest thing to be afraid of when the volume, everything's quiet now because of COVID, so you can concentrate on this, and it was able to break through the media with much more potency than ever before, and people had time to protest. All the things were right. As the world wakes back up from COVID, do people get distracted by the ball game or the bar or whatever, or do they stay committed when there's other things to do? Or you've got to start to reopen your office, and how are you going to clean it and all that? Don't take your eye off the ball. And that's what I hope groups like 600 Rising and some of the other things that are starting to pop up will right. I say this, nevertheless, she persisted. Well, if she can persist, you can persist. So stay at it, and hopefully people will be there to hold us to account.
Yeah, I just to add on to that, though, I think it's, we're holding everyone accountable, whether it's the companies we work for, whether it's the companies we buy and consume from, the schools we attended. My small private school has its own Instagram account now for Black students airing grievances about experiences that they've had. And I've seen many others doing the same thing. We're seeing anthropology getting called out, Reformation, right? So I think a lot of the so-called damage to these organizations has been done to the point where they have no choice. Even if they want to kind of move on and keep things going, they've had to react and make changes. And there's enough of us now, Black and, Black people of color allies, that are willing to keep pushing this forward until we continue to see the changes that we need. So I'm hopeful and optimistic.
I'm hopeful and optimistic also. I think we arrive at this from two separate points. Black folks have been waiting so long for this change that we're a little less patient than what it seems like, because we've waited for this to happen. We've waited for you to arrive at this point.
Right.
So the other part to it is you're coming into this and the only analogy I have is church. It's like a new convert. They're on fire. They're going to tear everything down. And there's that older person who knows this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. So, I'm sitting here going, y'all need to slow down a bit. Don't burn out at the front end, because I need you for the long haul in this. And I think that's where we are. I'm hoping that this will change, and I really do. But if we don't temper the amount of energy and commitment so that this is something that's sustainable over a long period of time, we will allow it to burn out like we have certain right after the president was elected. Remember the big protest?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not the Women's March, before the Women's March. Well, the Women's March morphed into it, but the first one was more about just everything. Mm-hmm. And they fizzled out so quick. And then the Women's March took over. And we've forgotten totally what their message was. The key to this is our pacing on this. And I'm not one to say, wait, Lord knows I'm not, because those words don't come out of my mouth. You had enough time. But what I'm saying is we have to pace and control to your point, once it opens back up, everybody's got other things to be concerned about. How do you keep this top of mind and your focus? And that's the plan. That's the importance of a plan.
Yeah.
I think we just have to keep it at the top of the conversation and keep doing these LinkedIn lives and having these conversations and keeping our foots on their proverbial necks on these companies. So we have to keep the conversation.
Yeah.
And we have to keep it on the news cycle too, I think, because if it's not there, then it kind of gets pushed aside. So I agree with Derek. Like, we have to space it out so it's always in the news cycle. If we do it all in one day, then it's going to be a flash in the pan. Yeah.
And I worry that fatigue is going to set in. See, we're so used to being, and that's such a sad statement. This is really a sad statement.
Fatigue is a privilege.
We are so used to being outraged that we have learned to carry this outrage with us for prolonged periods of time. And I'm meaning Black people. But it's something we shouldn't be used to. How wrong is that? That we are so used to seeing us die that we know we can carry this. Black folks could keep this going forever because we've kept it going forever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's to the point of it's a marathon, because for the people that this is new to in the past 3 or 4 weeks, it's, why haven't we solved this yet? This is, and it's just keeps getting bigger as, they're reading more and seeing, wait, this is a huge systemic.
I know we've had the privilege of ignorance is bliss for so long. That's just like, not
too much.
Tune out. And
right. And so it's right, as we dig into all these different pieces of society and peel back the layers, and it's, oh wow, our healthcare system is racist, our education system is racist, environmental justice, this is racist. Like, there's so many things. And so yes, there is, and it literally will take essentially upending America, because people saying that let's go back to America, this is the America I knew. Well, actually, it is. This is, America was built on racism, right? And I think that's the thing that is really hard for people to grapple with and understand and just move forward with and see how to chip away at it. But it's important that we still do the work, because, it makes meaningful change, even if we can't solve racism at a whole level, at least.
And I don't know about you guys, but I am constantly getting people going, well, what should we do? What's the first step to solving this? I'm like, what first step? In what situation? Davianne just listed out, 4 or 5 places racism lives? Where would you like for me to stir into this? But people are like, I need an answer now. And I'm like, this took how many centuries to build? The problem this is America's problem. We waved a wand after slavery and said, look, you're free. Go forth and be fruitful and be prosperous, and you're part of the American dream. Oh, but by the way, we're going to slap these Jim Crow laws on you.
Yeah. And you can't vote.
Yeah.
And you can't credit rating, and you can't have opportunities.
And then
good luck.
Yeah, and then we went a little further and we said, oh no, we get rid of those Jim Crow laws, but we'll keep segregation for a few more decades. But y'all will be okay. You should make it.
Yeah.
At what point do we have to reset and say, hey, look, this is a massive problem. To her point, this is a massive problem. This isn't a small problem. And we keep coming at it on the business end going, what do I do to solve this? Oh, Lord, you don't want to know the answer to that, because that's work.
Yeah.
Also beyond you.
Yeah.
I do tell people, Derek, when they ask me that, like, look, you follow your heart. You know what to do. You're asking the question to make yourself feel better. Instead of doing that, actually go through what you think you should be doing and go do it.
Yes, and that's a great thing. That's why I think I can give you a first step that nobody likes. Name what's wrong with you.
Absolutely.
You know,
Right.
talk to the person in the mirror. Have a good come to Jesus meeting with that person you see every morning in the mirror, and list out why it took a man being choked out for 8 minutes and 46 seconds for anybody to give a damn about the plight of Black people in America. We have been telling you for decades the police were not our friends. And that man choked out for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and the look on that officer's face, the indifference. And people say, oh, I'm not racist. I'm not biased or prejudiced. It took him dying for you to give a damn.
It took broken windows, right? Most white people didn't get involved until the protests got aggressive.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, unfortunately, we've seen a lot of Black men die on camera.
Mm-hmm.
White people got most upset, I think, when they started seeing cities get burned, when the police station in Minnesota got burned up. And that's like John Oliver said it. It's like when you care more about the destruction of property than the destruction of life, you are in a fucked up place. And I think that's the thing that white people got to recognize. If you're more upset about the rioting, then you're in the wrong space.
I think part of it, though, is when the police turned on white protesters with violence, with the violence they have reserved for Black people and brown people, white people went, excuse my language, what the fuck? That's not how you're supposed to respond to me, officer.
Right.
You want to talk about privilege? It's like, but officer, I'm white.
That baton's not for me.
No, those gas canisters and rubber bullets aren't for me. How dare you? I'm expressing myself. And Black folks are sitting back going, see, we tried to tell you. This is how they respond to us on a regular basis. You lined up with us, and they stopped seeing your whiteness. Your privilege evaporated, and they showed you the police showed you who they really are. And when the police showed everybody in America that they would whoop white folks' asses the way they whoop Black folks' ass, everybody went, oh, crap.
Yeah,
our police force is too dangerous. Well, damn, they've been armed like this for 30, 40 years. In Tampa, they rolled out an LRAD. And if you're not familiar with what an LRAD is, it's the latest in sonic weapons. It's designed to debilitate people using sound. How in the world does a police force in the United States have an LRAD?
Yeah, right. That's like high tech. That's
like
mounted on battleships.
Yeah, they use this in Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq, in the Middle East. This is the latest our military has, and a police force has one. And even worse, was willing to use it on American citizens. And that message among my white friends that are pro-police, that scared even them. To see a military grade weapon of that extent used on American citizens.
100%.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you so much for today. This is so insightful. I want to leave the audience with one thought from each of you guys. So we moved from making it other people's problems to everyone's problems, right? That's the first thing we realized through this whole conversation, through what's been happening last month and a half or so. What would you say leaders have to do right now in one sentence? What's the first thing they needed to do to help make this anti-racist, make the organizations anti-racist?
I'll start. I'll lead off with a quote from an author named Rennie Ito Lodge. She has a book called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race or Racism. And in her book, she had a quote that I think is great to leave off with. And she said, every voice raised up against racism chips away at its power. So I encourage people in leadership, especially, to keep speaking up and speaking out and opening up your organization to have these continuous conversations.
Okay, great. Thank you. Derek?
You got to get comfortable with talking race. You just have to. And it can't be led always by a person of color. When the CEO of a Fortune of an agency or a holding company or a Fortune 500 can sit and talk with his people or her people about race, then that's the first step. I mean, we've made race taboo. It's our sin that we won't address. So what we have to do is we have to finally get to the point to talk about it.
Davianne?
I'm going to go back to the self-exploration. I do believe that, you know, before we can have these honest conversations and lead, you know, and change our organizations, we really need to be honest with ourselves and where we're at and what needs to change within us, emotionally, behaviorally, identifying those biases, getting comfortable with them, uncomfortable with them. And, you know, having that guide the way that you make and enforce the change within your organization, because then it becomes personal, it's real, it's not just something that you're imposing on other people to fix and solve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Drew, thank you for waiting in line.
Okay. I would say it's up to you and not somebody else. You have to do it. You can't delegate it. You can't pass it on. You have to get over yourself and your own fear of embarrassment or saying something stupid or hurting somebody's feelings. Like, you're going to do all those things. I've done all those things. Just get over it. You got to do it anyway. Hard things you just have to do, whether it's going to be fun or comfortable or easy or not. Just suck it up and do it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, guys. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Everybody have a good day.
Great to meet you. Bye.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.